The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Today on Leadership Lunch, we're going to be talking about 3 techniques that help you create more hours in your day. Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Wittig. Welcome to the call. We're very excited today to share 3 kinds of lists you can make that are not to-do lists that will help you gain more control of your schedule. So as you know, there are a bunch of people on the call, so I'm going to put everyone in mute mode. If you can see the screen and hear my voice, please go ahead and raise your hand so that I know you can hear me and the technology is working. So go ahead and raise your hand. Excellent, thank you. And as you know, since everyone's in mute mode, the way to contact me is through the question. You can type questions into the chat, and that's the way to get in touch with me. I can't guarantee that I'll answer every question over the course of the call, but I will try to get to everything, and anything I don't get to on the call, I will definitely follow up with you afterwards. So feel free to send those questions over. We've got a couple of more people logging on. So as they're logging on, I'm going to launch the first poll, and please go ahead and let me know how you handle having too many things on your plate. Excellent, thank you. Listen, we got some people who have some good skills here. That's excellent. So there's a reason for the reason some people feel overwhelmed when they start getting a lot of stuff, and it goes back to our schools. Because in our schools today, there's a special word we use when we talk about teamwork. We call teamwork cheating. It's cheating. If they catch you working together on tests or problem sets or exams, you get in trouble, and they throw you out. So it's no question. So it's not a surprise that when people are faced with too much to do or faced with an overwhelming task list, the tendency to procrastinate. And the reason is that the way people are thinking is you have to do all the work yourself. That's what everyone's been taught since elementary school, that you have to do all the work yourself. And what we're here to talk about today is a better way. It's called collective engineering, and it's literally the process of developing great teams. Collective meaning of the group, and engineering is the process of putting knowledge to practical use. See, the thing nobody has probably ever taught you about delegating and about time management is that there are only 3 reasons that work doesn't get done. And once you know those 3 reasons and a bunch of strategies you can apply, you can move the process forward so that work gets done faster and more efficiently by you or the people who are working with you. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, the knowledge and the practical use. Now I'm going to launch the second poll. So the second poll talks a little bit about time in terms of, whoops, that was the wrong poll. Sorry, everyone. So how often do you have enough free time? That is the question that we're asking now. Excellent. And we're going to be talking a lot today about free time and what time means and how we can carve out more time for ourselves out of the kinds of things that we're doing. And so once again, today we're talking about collective engineering. And there are 2 things that are against us when we're working towards getting things done. We're working towards being very efficient with our day. The first is that there's this myth that teamwork is cheating. And as we said, that comes from our schools. But that tends to get in the way of people going and asking for help or get in the way of people taking the steps they need to take to do things, right? You really want to be able to ask people for help. You want to know when you can elicit help from other people. The second myth is this delegate and it's done. And today's call is a little bit different because the first 2 strategies we're going to talk about are actually ways to delegate to ourselves. So a lot of times we talk about how to delegate things out. Today we're actually focusing on ourselves and how we can become more effective ourselves as delegators. And so that's a very exciting kind of thing. And again, so that's the knowledge that we have. The knowledge is that there are these myths and that division, motivation, and learning are the only 3 reasons that work doesn't get done. And we're going to put them to practical use today by talking again about 3 lists that'll help us set our priorities and keep things moving forward a lot faster. So overview of how the call is going to go. We just talked a little about collective engineering. We'll come back and visit that later on. I'm going to talk a little bit through my story because all these techniques are techniques that I have used over the course of my work, and it's taken me long enough to learn that I want to teach them to you faster so that you don't have to struggle through everything the way I did. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, how I came to some of these things, then we'll get into the 3 practical strategies. And then at the very end, I have a special bonus at the very end of the call. Most of us have a to-do list, and to-do lists are actually not very effective in helping us be productive. But there is one simple change you can make to your to-do list. They'll make it much more effective, and so I'm going to share that strategy at the very end of the call, so be sure to stay tuned for the to-do list. So my story, as a lot of you know, I built my first computer when I was 13. Yes, I was that much of a geek. And then I got out of school and got into my first job and my first team. And quickly there was too much work to do, right? Even with a team there, and a lot of people feel this. A lot of people I work with feel this. That once you get the team, then the work really starts. And there were a lot of late nights. And I want to tell a particular story, a particular late night story for myself, because it's important. It's an important story as you're looking to gain control of your time and give yourself more free time. When I was working in computers, I was single. I tended to work a lot of late nights. And there was one particular night I remember where I was struggling with something, struggling with a problem on the computer. And so around 5:30, I came up with an issue, and I worked until 8:30 or 9, and didn't really make much progress on it, and got really frustrated and didn't. So I went home and I had a late dinner. I was already hungry. I didn't sleep well because I was working on it. And the next day, driving into work, I figured out the solution on the way in the car. And so that was fine, but I had a rough night. I hadn't gotten much sleep, and so it wasn't a great way to work. And a little bit after that, I decided to try a different technique. And so I ran into a problem, as I frequently did at 5:30. At 5:45, I left. I went home. I had my regular dinner. I did my stuff for the night. I went out and exercised, did all my stuff, and had a good night's sleep. And came in the next morning, and the same way, on the drive into work, I solved the problem. And so what I realized was that I was kind of wasting those hours at night in unproductive time, right? I was going to come up with a solution in the morning anyway. And it may sound a little bit risky to assume that the solution is going to be there in the morning, but it's really true. Like the way you work, and you have to understand the way you work, but it's certainly the way I work. That a lot of times solutions come to me if I just take the night off and take the night doing things other than work. So that was kind of when I discovered this first set of priority that I was kind of working more hours that weren't very productive for me, and to kind of pare it down so that I was doing productive work. And the thing that really motivated me from there is this E-myth idea, the entrepreneur myth, that you get into entrepreneurship to have free time, but what you usually find is that when you start doing this work, there's so many things you have to work on, so many things that you have to pay attention to, that you're not actually doing the work that you thought you were getting into doing. And so as part of becoming a franchisee and finding fish window cleaning, I was looking to create a business that ran without me. And we know this is possible because Bill Gates is not doing all the work at Microsoft, so it's clearly possible to do this kind of thing. But as we talk about, there's skills that aren't taught, and these are kind of skills that are part of the collective engineering work. So today, from being a computer programmer and working late nights, today I actually own 2 businesses. I'm part of 5 different networking groups. I run a volunteer organization of about 150 people, have a wife and new baby, and people look at me all the time and say, how many hours are in your day? And I got the same 24 hours as all the rest of you, but the difference is that I've learned some habits over time that help me leverage my time a little bit more, so that I can be sure I'm doing my highest priority thing at every time. I can be sure that I'm spending my time the way I want to, in the way that will make me most effective moving forward. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about 3 of these tools, 3 of these habits that I have. And I want to remind you as I talk through them that like any habit, like anything that we like to work with, these things take time to develop. And the stuff that I'm talking about today, I worked on over months. And what I'm hoping you'll do today is pick one of these and start using it, and just get used to, just put it in as one of your practices, as one of your habits, the thing that kind of makes the most sense to you. And that's really the step forward. Those habits that I put in place a couple of years ago have really gotten me to the point that I am now. And that's really what I hope for from you in sharing these, that you start taking on these habits. And these habits will help you delegate in a way, and delegate to yourself in a way that you can carve out the kind of time you want and be spending your time the way you really want to. So the first technique is called the stress list. And I've already talked about working late. I work with a lot of people. A lot of my clients talk about lying awake at night thinking about work. Right? It's kind of a different problem than I was lying awake thinking about work, kind of what needed to happen. And so I always kind of had this, issues keep me up at night. My mind is spinning. There's things going on, and I hear this from a lot of people. And as an entrepreneur, but I thought it was bad in computers. But once I became an entrepreneur, once I was responsible for sales and for operations and for all that kind of stuff, it only got worse. And so I started looking for a way of getting better at this. And the one night, what ended up happening was I got up and I wrote down everything I needed to do. I was lying in bed. I couldn't sleep. I had all these thoughts running through my head. I could not imagine what to do. So I just got up and took out a piece of paper, and I wrote down everything I absolutely had to do the next day. And much to my surprise, there were 3 things. I had a customer call that I had to do. I had to check on a project status, and there was a topic for an article I was supposed to write that I had to email to someone. And I ran through my brain, but those were the only 3. I was completely stressed out and completely unable to sleep. And it was only because of these 3 things. And the most interesting thing was that by writing them down, and there's another secret to writing them down, but we'll get to that in a moment. But by actually just writing down what it was that was on my mind, I ended up sleeping like a baby that night. It was really amazing that all my mind wanted to know was that I had things in hand, right? That I had kind of had a plan for things. And the really amazing thing was that the next morning, I sat down at my desk at 9:05, and I made my 2 phone calls. I didn't get them on the phone, so I just left messages, and then I emailed the topic off. And I was done. Like that was the work I had really. That was the work that had been hanging over me for the day. And by getting rid of it in the morning, I mean I didn't go home at that point, but I had the rest of my day to kind of do the work that I wanted to do the rest of that day. So it was a very strong lesson for me in terms of how to make sure your priorities are set and how to pay attention to what you're kind of what's going around in your brain, what's rattling around in your head, so that you can deal with it and move on. And so the strategy we're talking about here is that if you're lying awake at night, or even if you're at work and you can't concentrate, or wherever something seems to be overwhelming, what I love to do is pull out a sheet of paper and you write down everything that's on your mind. Just write down everything that kind of comes to mind. And the secret here, the secret to making this work, is that next to each one, you want to write the next step. So what's the next thing that you need to do on this thing that's stressing you out? And it's generally simple things, right? I mean, the things I had, there were phone calls and emails. I had to make a phone call. I had to send an email. I tend to get stressed out now a lot about kind of writing articles or doing writing kind of stuff. And so I do the same thing. I know that I have to write the article, so I set a time in the morning to write it. I sit down and write it, and then it's done, and my day is just in front of me. And so the strategy is to kind of get up, stand up, get out of bed, wherever you are, but write down your list of next actions, and then those are actually the next actions you want to take first thing the next morning, right? As soon as office is open, as soon as you can do it, you go ahead and do that. And a lot of people like to avoid doing accounts receivable kind of work. A lot of people like to avoid conversations with colleagues or employees, right? I know that I work with a lot of people who are kind of stressed out about the conversation they have coming up with an employee. And what you want to do is schedule out and just go ahead and do it as soon in the day as you can, because once you have that off your plate, the stress vanishes, and it's really a wonderful strategy for opening up the day for you, right? Instead of having it hanging over your head all day, instead of worrying about that thing and putting it off, you can actually take care of it right at the beginning, and that's how you kind of know what the important things are. Anything that's keeping you up at night is something that you want to deal with first thing the next morning. So that's strategy 1. I call it a stress list, and I call it a stress list because I write down the things that are stressing me, and I write down an action that will help take that stress off my plate. And the sooner I can get to that list of things, the better off I am, and the more it opens up my day. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them in while we're going. The next thing I like to talk about, I call the daily checklist. And the story behind this is that, well, anyone who's in cold call sales or anyone who has a lot of customer kind of work to do, you can hide behind a lot of things, right? If you have something that you're not completely excited about doing it as a part of your job, that isn't the thing you like the best, but you still have to do, it's very important to get out there and make it happen. And what we're talking about now, so I was in the position with my business that it was growing, but not growing that fast. And I was so busy, managing the cleaners and taking care of the things in the office that I really wasn't getting out and selling enough. And what ended up happening was I implemented this thing called the daily checklist. And I decided on the things that I needed to do every day to have the kind of year that I wanted to have. And so there were a certain number of sales I wanted to make, and I decided that each day I needed to hand out 25 business cards. So one of the things on my checklist was 25 business cards. And I was also doing sales work for my other business, for my Improv Andy business. And so one of the things on it was, I had to make an Improv Andy call. Every day I had to touch one Improv Andy prospect or customer, just one person. And the cool thing about this checklist was that it helped me make trade-offs, right? If I was out working with a customer or out doing an estimate, and I was driving past my bidding area on the way back to the office, say, oh yeah, I got to get those 25 cards handed out. So I'd hand out the 25 cards. And the really cool thing about it was that if I worked for a little while and I handed out 21 or 22 cards, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm the kind of person that's very motivated to put that check box, to put that check mark in at the end of the day. And if your goal is 25 cards and you hand out 22 cards, you can't put the check mark in. But there's very little extra effort required to take you from 22 cards to 25 cards. And so I would find a way of handing out 3 more cards, and then I could go home and check it off. And it was the same kind of thing with the sales calls for Improv Andy, that I was looking for, first of all, people to call, and second of all, opportunities to call them. So I started, I got a hands-free set for my phone. I started making calls during my commute. And so I was just kind of looking for ways to put these things into my process, into my day. And the cool thing that happened with it is that over time, I got much more capacity every day. Each day I got to do more and more things. And I will admit that initially I was very bad at it. That there were days when I did not get a whole lot of things checked off. There were days when it didn't happen the way I wanted it to. And I want to encourage you, when you're using this strategy, that it doesn't carry over. That the checklist is a daily kind of thing, and if you don't hand out 25 cards today, it's not that you have 50 cards tomorrow. Tomorrow the goal is still 25 cards, because what you're looking to do is put a habit in place for yourself. You're looking to put something in place that you do this on a daily, consistent basis. And if you miss a week, suddenly you have 200 extra cards you have to hand out, and that's very demotivating. So what we're really talking about is a motivational kind of thing. And again, from my point of view, I'm very motivated by check boxes of things. And so I change the checklist occasionally, depending on what it is that I'm trying to do. I actually don't use a checklist so much anymore, because having used the checklist, I have things in place now that my days are driven more by projects and customers, and projects and customers and presentations and those sorts of things. So the checklist kind of got me to the place that I wanted to be, where I'm doing the kind of work that I wanted to do. And so the checklist is good if you're saying to yourself, I don't have time to do that. I need to do that every day, but I don't have time to do that. The checklist is a really good strategy for making that happen. Oh, got a question coming through. Thank you. Yeah, can you give us examples of what your checklist looks like? Oh, sure. Yeah, I was talking a little bit about what my checklist looked like, but there were a couple of things. There were a couple of goals I had. I had growth goals for both businesses, and I had some exercise goals for myself. And so my checklist, there was one call for the Improv Andy business. I needed to make one call or touch one customer per day. There were 25 cold calls I needed to make for fish window cleaning, so I just had a check mark for that. I also had 3 pages of my journal checkbox every day. So I like to journal every day, kind of get my thoughts down, just kind of clear out my head. It helped me with my creativity. So I felt like that was an important thing to do. So I had 3 pages. And then I also, it's one of these funny things that for exercise, I had to walk 1 flight of stairs. So each day, instead of taking an elevator, at some point during the day, instead of taking an elevator, I needed to take the stairs. And, for example, we're in Boston, so if you go through Government Center, there are all these stairs you can take up and down, or you can avoid them. And so what I started doing when I was going to a meeting in Government Center, I would take the stairs instead of avoiding them, and that helped me check it off. And if you put an extra 100 steps in your day, each day for a week, for the year, that actually translates into a lot of extra exercise. And that's what the checklist is really for. It's chunks of things you can do on a daily basis that feel good, that you can do and you can feel good about. And I really recommend starting off with maybe 2, maybe 3 things that you can do, because it's a good way to get into the habit. And once again, it's a good way of prioritizing. Like, the really cool thing about it for me was that I kept reminding myself that 25 cards a day was what I was looking to do, and that and I wanted to walk 1 flight of stairs, right, to kind of keep myself in shape. So it all, what I did is I kind of took my long-term goals and turned it into a daily checklist that I could just check off. And you all know how everyone likes to check things off during the day, right? It's a very good kind of thing. And so once again with this, I'll remind you that one of the myths of delegating is this idea that you can delegate and it's done. And really nothing could be further from the truth. And the same is true when you're delegating to yourself. As the person that you're delegating to, you want to make sure that you're being gentle with yourself, right? I talk a lot about teaching. The process of delegating is teaching people how to do things and understanding that work not getting done is just part of the process. And so when you set up this checklist for yourself and something doesn't get done, you don't really want to beat yourself up about it. You just want to understand why the trade-off was, and maybe your kid got sick. Maybe that was why you didn't get to your stuff today. There are a lot of legitimate things that could have happened that would get in the way of your daily checklist. And you can just observe that and know that that's true, and the next day you go out and start from scratch again and go to meet the checklist. And it does take a couple of weeks to get into the habit of it. You know, that you build up resistance over time to getting these things done. But I tell you, there's nothing better than finishing a day where you have all the check marks in place. Right? That was the day. You get home at the end of the day, you can spend time with your family guilt-free because you finished all the things you needed to finish that day. And yes, I mean, there are other things that you do during the day. There are other things that come up. But from a strategic point of view, right, from kind of where you're looking to go over a longer term, you know that you're right on task, right? You did the stuff that you set out to do, and when you fill up a whole week of check marks, that is really cool, and it's good to celebrate that in some way, right? Have something you can do, you know, to take some time off or to spend extra time with your kids, or you know, whatever, however you want to celebrate that. It's good to celebrate that you got some things done. It's really important, and what we're talking about here really is developing good habits, right? That you know, there's a lot of talk now that you are what happens with your habits, right? You kind of make your life day by the checklist. The checklist gives you a way of making that more explicit, right? About sitting down and thinking, okay, what are the things that I really need to focus on each day, and then let you things and do them. And move it forward. And again, I set my stuff up. You know, this was a couple of years ago that I was using this technique, but I set it up. And the glorious thing about it is that I don't really need the checklist anymore because it's gotten me to the point that I want it to be. So the checklist is a really key thing for getting you into the habits. And the thing too is I don't need the checklist now because I have those habits. I make my phone calls. I hand out the cards. You know, I do my exercise kind of stuff. So I've kind of gotten myself into the habit of doing that. So it's internalized now, and I don't need the external checklist as much. So we've gone through two things now. We talked about the stress list. We've talked about the daily checklist as a way of getting more work done. And I want to talk a little bit when people are concerned that they're not having productive enough days, they're not getting enough done. What it really ends up meaning is there's a priority thing going on, right? That there are some things you felt like you should have been working on, and you were working on something else. And the strategies we're talking about today really handle that sort of thing, to be really explicit about what the most important things are. And one way of figuring out what's important is by listening to your stress, right, to being aware of kind of where your attention is and what it is that you want to be working on. And the second thing is by being very clear about what your goals are and what activities that you're taking part of that can really move those goals forward. And that's what I talk about when you have when you've checked off everything for the day. It really feels good. Like it's good to know that you're working on that. And then you can kind of let go of the work part of the day and spend time with the family. I'll also suggest that you can put family things in the daily checklist, right? I mean, if you want to read to your kids every day, or if you want to spend more time with your kids, it's good to put that in place. And again, all we're talking about is putting the discipline in place, helping yourself develop the habits so that you can get done what you want to get done, right? It's all about deciding what you want and then going after it. And this is just one of those tools that you can use to make that happen. So that's the daily checklist. And once again, I'll remind you that when you're using the checklist, the days are not cumulative. So every day is its own day. If you miss something a day, it's gone. And you just, you understand that you missed it, and your goal is to make the checkbox the next day, but things don't pile up because that's super demotivating. So the checklist is just a day-by-day kind of thing. So let's move on to our third tip for today. And the third tip I call a responsibilities list. And the responsibilities list, as a leader, when I teach people about leadership and work with people who are leaders, the responsibilities list is really a great way as a leader. You'll see the picture on the screen right now is of people raising their hands. And when I talk, as opposed to the thing up top was I want you. And if you're handing out assignments, right? If as a leader you're handing out assignments, I really don't feel like you're leading. That's more managing, and it's more task-oriented kind of stuff. And what you're really looking to do as a leader, what we're kind of working on in the series of webinars and the work that I do, is to help people think in terms of inspiring people to want to help out, right? To think of it in terms of, okay, I have, how do I get people to want to do this, right? Because when you get them to want to do it, you don't need to watch them as closely. They're just doing it. So when we talk about the responsibilities list, it's really a very, very strong approach for getting people to raise their hands, for getting people to volunteer and take part in what's going on. And I want to give two examples of ways I've used this recently. The first was for the window cleaning business. We were working on a town day, and I have 12 people working for me at the business now. And so as part of what I do, I like not to do everything myself. So I like to kind of hand things out. And so the way I approached this, and there was a lot of stuff we needed to coordinate, right? There were tents and tables and banners and all sorts of things that we needed to make sure all came together on the day that we needed to be at this essentially trade show. And so what I did was I made a list of everything I could think of that we needed to take care of. I went and sat down with my team. I sat down with my general manager and my ops manager and my admin and said, okay, here's a list of things that I'm thinking about, and let's just brainstorm kind of what's going on. And the couple of really cool things happened. The first cool thing that happened was there were two big things that I had missed. The first thing I missed was that there were shopping bags I had bought, reusable shopping bags to hand out with our logo on it and everything that I'd forgotten to put on the list, and so we added that to the list. And the second thing was kind of a bowl of candy. We were looking to get kids. We were looking to get kids around, and so something on the table that was kind of interesting to kids, so the family would kind of come over. Those were the kind of people we were looking for. So again, by having the list, it allowed us to think through the entire list of things that needed to happen. And then once we had the list, people volunteered for the different parts, right? My admin volunteered to print out the stuff and kind of collate the things and pull the brochures and make all that stuff happen. My operations manager had a tent that he was going to bring, and I took on. We had someone donating a tent for the day, so I that was one of my relationships. So I took care of that. I took care of working to get the banner done, and then somebody else took care of putting the shopping bags together. And the key to all of this, if you're on one of my previous webinars, and if you weren't on last month's webinar, I encourage you to go back and listen to it in the archive. The last month's webinar, we talked about how best to follow up. So again, as a delegator, I take this responsibility list, and we put a name next to every person and take a look at what people are going to do. And then once we've done that, I need to follow up before the actual deadline. So we set a deadline, but then I followed up with everyone as to how things were going before the deadline actually occurred. And the reason for that is once the deadline has passed, there's nothing you can do about it anymore, right? The ship has sailed. It's too late. It's too late to make it right. And that just puts kind of a negative energy on things. People don't like to fail, and it feels like failure if you miss your deadline. And so as a leader, part of your job is to make sure that things are on track. And so having this list and knowing when things were due and knowing things were going on, it was very easy to keep track of where things were. And Town Day went off without a hitch. It was one of the most stress-free things I had ever done, given the amount of work that was involved in putting it together. And a lot of it came from this responsibilities list. It's really one of the keys to accountability. The second thing I like to talk about is that I run this leadership program with high school juniors, and part of the work we do is to take high school seniors who've been through the program the previous year and teach them how to run the program this year. And part of the work is to delegate things to them, right? When the weekend runs best, the seniors are actually running the weekend, and the adults are there just to kind of supervise and to be there for resources. But we really want the seniors to kind of take ownership of these things. And when we start the program, it's kind of this registration phase that several years ago was not good. Kids were kind of standing around. There wasn't much to do. It wasn't very well organized. And so I was reminded of this recently because we're starting up the program again. We're starting up everything this year. And what we did was we wrote up a list of things. So that, for registration, we need someone handling the name tags. We need someone showing the kids to the cabins. We need someone handling kind of the icebreaker games. And then the other thing that's available for the weekend is people to run the talent show. And so what we did was we presented this list of things to the seniors and said, hey, these are the things. What would you guys like to work on? And it's funny how it always works out. There's always people to handle all different things, right? When you look at the different personalities and the different people in the room, you don't usually have too many people signing up for one thing or another. And when you have a list of things, then people can gravitate to one or the other. And the really cool thing as well is that people love knowing what they have to do, and they love knowing that other things are taken care of, right? It's much easier to focus on what you're doing, knowing that the rest of the things are going on, right? If you're running the registration games and you know that the kids are being taken to the cabins by someone else, it's much easier to focus on the games. And so this is really, I talked a little earlier about kind of inspiring people to step up and take the lead on these things. And it's really great as a leader and as a delegator to think in this way, right? As you have something that you want help with, right? How do you ask for help? How do you ask your team for help, right? You got a big project coming up and you need help with that. How can you break it down so that you can give people responsibilities for different areas? And you'll notice that I call it a responsibilities list, not a task list, right? When you talk about tasks, people feel like it's something they have to do or something they've been assigned. When you talk about responsibilities, that feels good, right? That's something you can take control of and take charge of and be good at. And so the third strategy we're talking about here is creating this responsibilities list. And once again, there's two reasons you do that. The first is that you'll find holes, right? When you share this with your team will come up with things that you haven't thought about, and it gives you a better list. And the second thing is it gives a really easy way for people to volunteer, right? Here are the things that are available. Which looks best to all of you, and then people kind of shuffle around and figure out which thing they want to work on. And then you can work with the different leads in all of those groups, right? If you're looking at kind of managing and leading and you have a bunch of projects going on, then you know how to follow up with everything. And so the job as the leader is to set up what the responsibilities are, make people responsible for them, and then do this nice follow-up before the deadline to make sure that things are on track. So that's kind of where the responsibilities list fits in. So I'll pause for a moment there. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in now and let me know. Otherwise, we will continue moving on. Excellent. Okay, and if you're in the middle of typing something in, feel free to keep typing. I'll get it when you set it in. So we've talked about our 3 strategies for today. As you know, Leadership Lunch is most of you have signed up for the Year of the Leader program. And so what's coming up, we have a really cool, it's going to be really fun next month. May is multitasking. So we're going to talk about, same way we talked today about about time management, we're going to talk about multitasking, how to get better at multitasking yourself, how to make your employees better at multitasking. There's a lot of misinformation floating around about multitasking. We'll dispel all those myths and talk about 3 real strategies you can do to get more done. That's another way of getting more done in a day. And my favorite program is coming up in July, stress-free vacation. So how can you put things in place, especially as an entrepreneur or even as, even as a manager, how do you put things in place so that you can go away and you don't need to be bothered every day, right? You can go away on your vacation and enjoy your vacation and not worry that things are going on, not worry about things that are going on in the office. And so we're going to, in July, we're going to discuss 3 strategies for that. So that's what's coming up with the Leadership Lunch. And of course, the latest information about Leadership Lunch is always at leadershiplunchwebinars.com. So feel free to take a look there. That's where the latest information always is. So I want to revisit collective engineering for a brief moment. To talk about, so what we talked about today, we were talking a lot about motivation, actually, like in terms of how do you motivate yourself to get the things done every day that you need to get done. So when we talked about the daily checklists and the stress lists, that was really kind of, instead of feeling overwhelmed by what's going on or being stuck behind your stress, you kind of put that stress out there and figure out what it is that you need to do to move forward. And that ends up being very motivating. When we're talking about the responsibility list, that covers both vision and motivation. And remember, when I talk about vision, a lot of people have the vision. The key as a leader is to figure out how to communicate that vision, right? Where this tends to fall apart is where people aren't able to communicate the vision effectively enough. And the responsibilities list is a great way of communicating your vision, right? These are the things. These are the bigger chunks that need to be taken care of. How can we take care of those? So in the context of collective engineering, we've worked on 3 strategies today, 3 strategies surrounding time management, kind of in the vision motivation kind of area. So that just puts it in context. And I encourage you and that's part of what these webinars are about. We talk a lot more about collective engineering, and each month is strategies like today to keep things moving forward. So now we're going to wrap up. I'm going to launch the last poll. If you can just tell me the most valuable strategy you saw today, kind of which one you thought would be most useful to you. Excellent. Thank you very much. So once again, today we talked about collective engineering. We talked about 3 kinds of lists. We talked about the stress list, the daily checklist, and the responsibilities list. If you have any questions, we're kind of running toward the end here, but if you have any questions, feel free to run them through. And I promised at the end I would have a special bonus thing about to-do lists. And the thing about to-do lists is that they tend to be one big grab bucket. You've got a whole mess of things, and you keep adding to it, and it's hard to kind of figure out how to get track of it. And the strategy I've used, the first strategy to apply your to-do list is to actually split your to-do list up by location. What do you mean by location? Well, there are things on that list that you can't do just anywhere, right? There's things that you can't do in your car. There's things that you can't do at the office. So each thing kind of has a location. And each location thing, and each location has a list of things that need to be done. And so if you break your to-do list up into things that need to be done at home, things that need to be done in the office, things that need to be done in front of a phone, things that need to be done in front of a computer, it actually cuts the list down a lot. And I, for example, have a list of things that need to be done when I'm at the fish window cleaning office. And I can't tell you how much time I have saved by having that list of things as the fish list, right? Because when I'm in the office, there was something recently where it was a 2-minute project, but if I had forgotten to do it that day, it was going to be 2 weeks before it got done. And so what I really recommend doing is cutting down your to-do list into groups. And if you want more information about this, there's a survey that comes up when we're done, and just say you want more information about the checklist and the to-do list, and I'll be happy to send you a template that I have about the to-do list. And if you're listening to this on a recording, it's actually available in the archives. If you look in the archives, there's a way to download this information as well. So once again, the strategy is to look at your to-do list in terms of where things need to happen. So if you need to write, if you need to write something, that's probably at your computer. If you need to make a phone call, that's just at the phone. And so, if you're in your car and you have hands free, you can take a look at your call list and just start making calls. And it's been very powerful for me. It really saves me a lot of time because I have the full list of everything I need at every location I've got. So I want to thank you very much for being on the call today. Once again, next month we're going to be talking about multitasking, and July is my favorite thing, again, about stress-free vacations. Everyone loves that. Thank you very much for being on the call today. Hope it was helpful. Please remember to fill out your survey at the end, and I look forward to talking to you next month. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.